Welcome to the Happiness Happens podcast. I'm Simona Nicole, host of the show, mindset coach, and motivational speaker. I've made it my mission to help you get unstuck, shift your mindset, and understand your worth to help you live your most purposeful life. Each week, I will bring you an idea, guest, or a positive thought that will leave you inspired and empowered to win your life. We decide the stories we tell ourselves and where we invest our energy. I'm so grateful you popped in. Now let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode on the Happiness Happens podcast. I'm very excited, very excited to bring you today's guest. I think that you're going to learn a lot from this conversation. I think that there is a lot of insight that's going to come out of the things that Alyssa shares. And so on the podcast today, we have Alyssa Rocco, and she's on a mission to create positive change in the world. She came to the Handel Group 7 years ago with a desire to change her career. She spent nearly a decade in the biotech industry participating in the launch of 2 successful life-changing medicines for cystic fibrosis and hepatitis C, but she still felt like there was something missing in her life. She did 1 session with a coach at Handel Group and quickly discovered what was missing, that she really wasn't truly living her own dreams. She wasn't happy, and she didn't know how to become happy. This realization inspired a journey, which we're going to hear all about. She became a coach, changed careers, learned how to date honestly, transformed the dynamic in her family, navigated addiction, and confronted how to create and maintain great relationships in her life. She brings a deep understanding of the Handel Method to the work that she does with her clients and students at MIT. And her analytical mindset and process-oriented nature led her to work in the media division. And one of the most recent projects that she did was to build and test and launch Inner.U, which is Handel Group's first digital course. She has tons of updates on the coaching front, so we'll dive into her story. But to sort of let you know a little bit more about her, she grew up in Boston, has a bachelor's degree in communication, film, and technical writing from the University of Massachusetts every time at Amherst, and her master's degree in organizational psychology from the Massachusetts School of Psychology. She is certified in process improvement techniques and 6 Sigma practices. She is a dancer and practices 5 rhythms dance and is now living in New York. Are you still in New York, Alyssa?
I relocated.
You did?
During
wow.
COVID. That's a story.
That's a story. Okay, well, I want to just dive on in. Can you tell me a little bit about the journey that's brought you to where you are today?
Yes. Oh my God. First of all, I just want to say thank you for having me on the show. And I'm just thrilled to connect with you and speak to your audience, and happy to share my story. So
where do I begin?
Well, let me say what was going through my mind as you were reading my bio. It's like, wow, that really doesn't say much about the insides of a human to hear the outsides. And really, that's where my story begins, is from the beginning. I was somebody that was always really could not understand my mind. Okay, so when I was a little girl, I was deathly afraid of the world. Like the voice in my mind was scared, mean, and lied to me, right? And I didn't understand at the time that like that voice was not the truth. I listened like it was. So I really grew up always just fearful of people and isolated myself because I really didn't understand that wasn't real. There was nothing to be scared about. So for me, I was always looking for external solutions to the internal problem of my mind that was always obsessively worrying. And so I would find things like dance that provided ways to like release that fearful dialogue. And dance was my first addiction. It was my first love. And when I was dancing and I was in my body, I wasn't in my mind. And so I noticed that right from the beginning was like a source of like pleasure and peace. And then I also had other addictions, like, you know, like sugar, right? Where I was like, from the get-go, sugar had an impact on me physically. And I would lie, steal, cheat, you know, to get sugar. So like, I really was somebody that didn't understand the voice, would look for ways to quiet that voice, and would look for things outside of myself to control. As I got older, that became more about controlling what I ate. I was bulimic and anorexic when I was in high school. And, you know, for me, I really didn't know that, right? I just thought that like I wanted to maintain and look a certain way, and I wanted to be able to eat whatever I wanted. So for me, there was a solution called bulimia. And I couldn't be honest about that, because if I was honest about it, I'd have to stop. So like, I really was somebody who wanted to look a particular way, and then was doing all these things on the back end to manage my appearance. And when I was probably about 16 years old, I discovered alcohol. And the first time I drank, I remember just having this feeling of like confidence, actually. And again, this like quietness in my mind. I wasn't listening to that voice that was always vacillating between I suck, I'm not good enough, everybody's cooler than me, why don't I fit in, why is it that everybody has it together, why don't I? And when I drink, I didn't hear that voice. So I think this is the solution, right? I'm like, yay, I'm here, because I could say whatever I wanted. It gave me the illusion of connection, because it wasn't a slave to a voice that told me not to connect with people. And so, you know, all throughout my 20s, I would say, you know, through college, I was somebody who didn't eat a lot, drank a lot, and looked like I was happy, and, you know, spent a lot of time around people, but inside I was hollow and empty. I was very insecure. I was always worried that I wasn't good enough. The outside didn't match the inside. And when I graduated college, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go into the workforce and I'm going to be the best worker ever, right? And that was really what started my career in biotech. And I really started as a technical writer, just simply because there was a program at UMass Amherst that had like 99% job placement for writers as a technical writer. I got this job in biotech, and it allowed me to travel and start to learn the different stages of the drug development process. And I was somebody that, you know, I could learn really fast, right? And because I had this obsessive mind. So if I focused on something, even if it was dance, if it was sugar, if it was you, if it was alcohol, whatever it was, you became the thing that I wanted, and I was myopic in that. So I became very good at understanding how to like work my way up the corporate ladder, I would say. And I knew how to speak a particular way and present a particular way. But I would say all of those things were tactics and tools, because behind the scenes, I was doing everything I could to present the image of happiness, but I was still drinking too much, over exercising, under eating, all of these things to maintain the aesthetic of happiness. And then inside, I'm hollow. So I started dating the boss at work. Like, so again, like, you know, all of these things that were not being said, but I internally thought. I started dating the guy at work. He was like the senior guy at work. And I just remember we'd been dating for 5 years. And it was the point, like late 30s, when everybody's getting married. And I remember just thinking, like, asking everybody, do you think we're right together? Do you think we're right together? Just like needing this external validation, because my whole life had been about external validation. And it was at that point that I did the 1 hour session with a coach totally fortuitously, because I had started at that point to kind of look to solve the problem of why there was such a disconnect between what the outside looked like and how I felt inside. And that's when I went back to school, organizational psychology, started to look in the self-help arena, did 1 hour with a coach. And it was the first time anybody ever looked at my writing. And what the coaching process requires is that we write our dreams for all the different areas of life. And there are 12. And so I wrote my dream for what I wanted in my love relationship. And then I wrote where I was today and why. And it was the first time anybody had looked at the contents of my thoughts and reflected back the truth to me. And she said, I don't know that you're in love with him, Alyssa. He doesn't match your dream. And in that moment, it was like, somebody spoke the truth to me that I could not see because I was in my own experience in my mind. And I was so afraid to tell the truth about that I was willing to stay in denial and just, but not really, right? Like there is that conflict when we try to compromise our head and our heart, what we intuitively know and what our mind is telling us. Mm-hmm. So in that moment, I realized she was right. And I decided to do a weekend retreat with the coaching company I then worked for called Handel Group. And in that retreat, and I'll pause after this part, the first day was all about telling the truth. And so we learned how to have an honest conversation. And I went home that night to have an honest conversation with my dad. And the same thing that always happened, where I started to have this conversation with him. He, got in a fight with my mother about something else. And then they got in a fight. I smile and I go into the bathroom and I make myself throw up. Right. And that dynamic of like presenting one way to please them and look a certain way and then going in the back and doing what I do was what I was like stark to me, because I had this assignment, right? I'm like, wow, I can't even complete the assignment because of what I'm doing. And it was at that time that I realized there was something really messed up about that. And I went in the next day and I confessed to the group of people who were strangers, so it felt safe that was what I did. And it was at that time that I realized when you told the truth, you could receive grace of God, higher power, reality, whatever you call that. But the love that I felt in that moment was so abundant. I just felt hugged by all of these people. And I made a promise, as we do in coaching, when we want to change a behavior. And I made a promise that I wasn't going to engage in that behavior again of bulimia. And if I did, I would have to tell my family that I did that. Mm-hmm. So I only engaged one more time. And I remember I sat, because I made that promise, and I made it not just to myself, but to other people. So I had to sit my family down. I'm Italian, big, Italian Irish family. I'm the oldest of 4. And I sat them down and I told them the truth. And seeing their faces and having to confront the impact of my behavior really did something to the wires, did something to the way I thought about it and what was no longer allowed, according to me, according to what I wanted for myself, right? Because it didn't align with my dream of who I wanted to be. And telling the truth about that and being accountable to my family, that stopped it right there. So I'll pause there.
I'm like, I could just listen to you continue on with your story because it's so inspiring. As I've been listening to you, there's so many similarities that I pull out from my own life to your story. And some of them make me really emotional, because I think there's a lot of the time where people go through life with a persona that they're happy and they're not. You know what I mean? And it's taboo to not, if you look like a happy person, you are a happy person. For the most part, you're a happy person. That's one thing that I hear a lot. in my own family, for example, if I'm upset one day, it's a lot of, but you're happy like all the time. Your brand is about happiness. So stop being so negative. And it's like every time that feels like a shot to the gut, because it's like you don't get to say what somebody else is feeling or if somebody else is upset about something. So I love so much the candidness of your story, and the ability to confront that truth that is a very easy truth to keep in the dark. It's very easy to keep that secretive. You know what I mean? Bulimia, like it's very, I mean, I am not bulimic. I never have been bulimic, but I can only imagine the associated, and like, forgive me if I'm not using the right language, but like the associated shame that you would feel from having to keep a secret like that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that for me, it was easier to control what I could control, right? I can control my food intake. I can control what I weigh on the scale. I can control exercise. I can control. So I would find things to fixate on and control outside of myself because of how out of control I felt inside. And I didn't have tools at that point to understand my feelings. I didn't grow up in a family that it was allowed to talk about feelings and you could be happy and sad and mad and scared and angry, and that was all okay. All the different expressions that we have as a human being. There was one. It was happy. If I wasn't happy, and this wasn't necessarily them, by the way. This was what my mind decided about me. I was the fixer. I was the one that had it all together. I was the one that was okay. And therefore, happiness was the only mode that was allowed, period, end of story. I decided that. Therefore, if I was upset, I didn't understand it. I decided there was something wrong about me. And so my whole journey has been about telling the truth to confront the dark side, which is the voice that wanted to do all of those bad behaviors, right? So to kind of speed up my story, I decided after that weekend that I really wanted to be a coach. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't understand. Like I was just like, okay, this is the way, as I do, right? As addiction is, there's great assets that come with somebody who's an addict. One is the ability to really go all in. It's very extreme, right? You're either on or you're off. So that was the next savior for me, coaching. And I went all in and I trained for 2 years. And when I graduated, I moved to New York City from Boston. And now I'm like 33. I got out of that relationship. So coaching really helped me get out of that relationship. I stopped the bulimia. I started to put healthy food practices in place. I became a coach. I'm in my dream apartment. I have the budget, I have money in the bank. And I'm like, this is it, right? I think that I'm going to meet the love of my life and everything is going to fall into place accordingly. It didn't work out that way. And it didn't work out that way because I was still lying about alcohol and my use of alcohol, and the way that it would manifest was, I really would be excellent, like the best in terms of what I ate and worked out and did all during the week. And then I would, justify drinking on the weekend. And it wasn't tons of alcohol. It was like, I would say between 2 or 4 drinks. But the thing about how I drank is I was a binger. Right. So like there were times when I could stop at 2. There were times when I could not, and I would end up in a blackout. The thing that was always consistent with me was how much I thought about alcohol. If you stuck a ticker tape in my mind, it was always about, like, on Monday, I was planning my drinks for Friday, right? Because I fundamentally was so uncomfortable with being present, with being connected to the person in front of me, that intimacy, that vulnerability, that I still didn't learn because I wasn't willing to give up all of my control tactics, my addictions. And alcohol was the one that really broke the camel's back, because after 3 years of coaching and really like learning how to teach somebody the method, I wasn't practicing it. And that lie, that out of integrity, it made my life be unmanageable, because I knew that I was hiding something, really. Even though I would like keep a promise and not drink, I would lie about how much I thought about it. And so eventually, after 3 years, my life became unmanageable. Like, I was still working with people, but I was sloppy. I was making mistakes. I was like constantly berating myself. And the founder of the company, Lauren Zander, who is an angel for me, truly, she confronted me and said, make a list of what you're hiding, Alyssa. Like, you're a mess. There's something going on with you. Make a list. And I did. And in my list of lies, it was all about alcohol, all about how much I thought about it, when I broke my promise and I didn't tell the truth, like alcohol, and a bunch of other things, right? And she gave me an ultimatum. She said, look, you can't coach this way. So you either are going to leave the company, or you can take a different role in the company and you can get sober. And she even offered for me to like work inside of her home to save money. I mean, she truly was my angel. And I did that. I moved out to her farm. I got sober. And after 2 years, I eventually got my, job back as a coach, and my teaching and who I started speaking to, really was heavily influenced as well by 12 steps, because fundamentally, like, that gave me a relationship to a power greater than my mind, which allowed me to deal with reality versus the God in my mind that wanted to control the world. So, that really brought me back into New York. And then just recently, about 2 weeks ago, I was telling you before we started, this is the last piece, actually. I have to tell this part because it's like so divine that this happened. Back in October, they discovered a mass in my body, the doctors, when I was in New York City.
Wow.
They thought it was cancer. Didn't know, went through lots of testing. And now we're in COVID, right? So like COVID just happened, and I think I'm going into surgery to have the thing removed. I come out of surgery, the doctor is like, we couldn't remove it, Alyssa, I'm sorry. The mass has changed in its size. To remove it, you need major abdominal surgery with a permanent ostomy bag. That's the only way.
Oh my God.
And so I'm thinking, again, my mind, I'm like, I just have to say, okay, like, the doctor is telling me what to do. This is the only way. And my coaches, so I like tell the truth about that. My coaches are like, absolutely not. Are you kidding me? Get a second opinion. You always get a second opinion. And I was connected fortuitously through angels, again, to a doctor in Santa Monica who was, consulting with me as I'm like also going through like, who's going to do the surgery now that COVID's happening. And I finally said to her, look, if I come to Santa Monica, will you do the surgery? And she said, yes. And I literally like flew out that night, went for surgery on the Monday. It turns out it was not cancer. She ended up removing the entire mass in one surgery. I don't have, like, I'm 100% recovered and healed.
Wow.
And I'm living in Venice. Like, I decided I'm just going to stay out here. So I got my apartment in Venice. I met a man during this whole experience. And
Wow.
And I decided to, just 2 weeks ago, I decided amicably and beautifully to split from Handel Group and continue to teach the Handel Method, because it's radically changed my life, but also speak more specifically to people in recovery and addiction. And that feels like divine and the right move on behalf of my dreams. So I feel really good about that. But, it's like, it's such a wild ride. Right.
That's insane. That is a crazy, crazy ride to have been on, especially during a time that's so uncertain. I think the thing that stands out the most to me in what you were saying is that you were presented with a set of options or an option. And, you know, somehow knew that there could be something else. So, you know, I think that it just really goes and speaks to the fact that it's not always what it seems. You know what I mean? Life isn't always what it seems. Your like situations, what you're in, how you feel, it's not what it seems. There's always another option. There's always another opportunity. You know what I mean? Regardless of how it works out, there's always the opportunity to try again. There's always the opportunity to look for something, you know, different. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you know, that's like a big theme that I'm pulling out of your story as you're talking. It feels very, you know, the actual ability to create your dream, because people say all the time, my dream life, but it's like, what does that actually mean? You know what I mean? How would you define dream life?
Yeah. Well, how I would define dream life is living on like designing life on life's terms, like meaning. And what I mean by that is my mind throughout my life has lied to me. It's told me I needed things I didn't. It told me alcohol was the solution when it wasn't. It told me that I wasn't a great human. It told me I was not worth enough. It told me it's lie, right? And so for me, when I am willing to tell the truth about what my mind is saying, I am now reconnected to reality, to other people who are not inside my mind, who can reflect the truth, who can reflect love, who can reflect options. And then hearing those people and being willing to hear, and then really also come back to my own heart and mind, and trust that the next.
I want to quickly pause this interview and tell you about the Handel Group coaches that I've had the honor and privilege of bringing onto the Happiness Happens podcast. With every conversation and interview, I've learned something so impactful and so life-changing. Inner.U Life is the online coaching course from Handel Group that gives you the tools to get yourself unstuck, wildly happy, and thriving where it matters most to you. Your relationship to yourself, career, love, body, money, time, and more. From wherever, whenever. Recommended by Hugh Jackman, Dr. Mark Hyman, Forrest Whitaker, Elena Brower, and hundreds more. Taught in MIT, Stanford School of Business, and 50 plus institutes of learning across the world. Visit inneru.coach and use the code HappinessHappens at checkout for $75 off. Now, back to the episode.
Next right action that aligns with moving me forward in a positive direction, and being willing to take that action, even if I don't know what it means, if I don't, my mind is scared, like regardless of what's happening up here, really like learning how to trust my body and my heart and my gut and my intuition based on what comes in from the universe. That ability, that dance, is what I now know to be learning how to live my dream life.
That's a beautiful answer. Actually, when you were speaking, everything that you've said, I'm just so emotional. I had tears in my eyes when you were talking, because I think, you know, your story is I don't want to, it's not the same as other people's, because everyone's story is different, but there are a lot of similarities in what you're speaking about that I've always seen in myself. Do you know what I mean? And so you sort of talking about all these things, and like, even if you feel the most stuck, there's always, you can just always keep going, you know?
Always.
I love that. I love that so much. So are you still coaching now?
Yes, I am coaching now.
Under like your own sort of label, if you will?
I am a free agent. Like I am a contractor, free agent, building a practice And, you know, fundamentally, the foundation of what I teach is the Handel Method, which was founded by Lauren Zander and being taught in the Handel Group, which is a life coaching company,
Mm-hmm.
and truly the foundation for the work that we do in the world, rooted in personal integrity, which is aligning our actions with our highest ideals, our actions and our thoughts with our highest ideals. But for me, the change has come through taking the right action, because my mind, like I said, and for anybody that struggles with addiction or any type of mental health issue, I know we're in the middle of Mental Health Awareness Month, right? And people who really don't understand that what their mind is giving them is false information from lineage, from, you know, not what you even agreed to, right? That is something that has fundamentally changed the way that I live life. So it's something I'm very passionate about speaking to.
Mm-hmm. In terms of addiction and mental health, what is it? What are how do you help people through this? Like, what are some of the first things that you sort of, and you don't have to give me all of them, but like, what's like when someone speaks with you for the first time, what are you how are you aiming to help them, if that makes any sense?
Definitely. So I want to just say there's a difference between somebody who's at rock bottom that finds the rooms of AA because they're brought to their knees of destruction. That's one way that you can get help. But then how I work with people is in a growth capacity. So people who come to coaching are coming to expand their life. And so when somebody comes, the first step that we do is we ask for you to write your dream in 12 different areas of your life: your relationship to your body, your career, money, your family. So we have all these different areas, and we ask you to write your dream for 1 year from today. And then we ask you to write where you are now. Rate yourself, rate your current reality, and write where your current reality is. So I want to be 130 pounds. I'm currently 200, and here's why. Because at night when I'm lonely, I watch Netflix and I eat ice cream, and then I go to bed on the couch and I rinse and repeat and do the same thing the next day, and I don't know why I can stop. Okay, that's an example. And then when I go in to work with somebody, what I do is I have them make promises to themselves, just like I did with bulimia. So the first step in personal integrity is to make a promise that aligns with your dream. Okay, we're going to have you eat 3 healthy meals a day, no binging. Cool. Now, what happens for most humans, not just addicts, but all humans, is that we make a promise and we break it. This is why resolutions do not work, because the voice in our head, which we help you understand, and we actually even separate it into 2 main categories. Well, 3 really. The voice of the chicken, which is fear, and the voice of the brat, which is, I just want to. So why do I watch Netflix and eat ice cream? Because I want to. Leave me alone. I worked hard enough. Don't you understand? Okay? That is what the brat will say. So because we have a mind that tells us wrong information, we put in place a designed incentive called a consequence, okay, to actually incentivize us to keep the promise. So if I don't eat my 3 healthy meals and no binging, I don't get Netflix the next night, right? That is like a basic example. When I was teaching myself to meditate, I would meditate for 20 minutes in the morning. My consequence was I don't get coffee until I meditate. So it's just like how you would train a child. You have to eat your healthy food before you get your dessert. Right? And we use the same type of structure to actually use our vices as incentives. And then the third step to practicing personal integrity, you have promise and a consequence, is the go public, telling somebody else, just like I do with my family. That's what keeps us accountable. I put somebody in that structure. I usually put them in for 30 days. 30 days is enough time to really make a change and create a habit, but it doesn't kill our brat who's like, are you kidding me? Do I have to do this forever? Come on, Alyssa. right? Which is my first voice. Anytime I put anything, my brat is going to rebel and say, screw you. So that's the structure. And then for somebody like me who's an addict, I couldn't keep a promise to myself around drinking. I would lie, I would manipulate, I would steal, I would add more shots in my one drink because I was trying to get more. I couldn't stop. And so that's really where the line is between, are you somebody that needs more of a 12-step program or some other modality to really help you learn the right behavior? Or are you somebody that can keep a promise? And when you can keep a promise to yourself, you can really go deal with the root cause of why you're breaking your promise in the first place, which has to do about connection and learning how to have conversations with people that are honest conversations from the heart. And that's a big part of what we do in coaching.
That's amazing. What would you say is the hardest part about rebuilding your life?
The hardest part, I love this question because I love this question. It's in every time change happens, we have to grieve the loss of what just died. And new beginnings are what we're afraid of most. So in this new beginning, I just stepped into with my own practice. Like I got to a point where as a coach, I knew how to coach people, right? Like my mind knew the steps. I knew what to say. I was confident. And then now all of a sudden, it's like the rug was pulled from underneath me and I don't have those grounding structures. I don't have that confidence in what my mind knows. That uncertainty that comes from doing something for the first time is what is so scary, ungrounding, I'd say, right? Because it's uncertain. And then the only way to navigate uncertainty is to build up the trust in yourself. And so that's why learning how to make and keep a promise is so fundamental to be able to make those big changes. Because if you understand how to keep a promise to yourself on the small things, you can do it on the big things. The first action I took when I started my own business was I put myself in a 30-day integrity challenge where I'm writing a blog every day. I'm spending 30 minutes on my business plan. I'm telling one person a day about my company because I literally only spent a week without having a promise in place around my business. And the self-centered fear was unbearable of how I felt. Like I went from feeling exactly like very confident, knowing exactly what I was doing every day, to not having any idea. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm screwed. Why does I missed my old, can I just go back? What am I doing? I made the wrong decision. Why did I do this? That was dumb. Every thought under the sun. And that's what happens every single time I try something new. That voice comes back. And most people identify that as there's something wrong, right? And that is actually not true. When we hear the voice of fear, it means we're on the right path. We have to move forward. So understanding that's what happens and learning how to work with it, and learning it's like your arm, right? It's like you can't just get annoyed at your arm, but you just have to understand it's your arm. It's limited. It can only reach certain distance, different from your leg. So when you understand that about the voice of fear, you can work with it, you can dance with it, you can move past it.
That's incredible. And I really love that answer because I think that it's such a holistic view and approach of how you essentially rebuild what it is that you want to do. Because as you were saying this, I was thinking to myself, how many promises I've broken to myself just this week? And then I'm like, that's fine. It'll be fine. You know what I mean? And how many times I've had that same fear creep in. And so, it's really interesting because it's like, all of these things that I've said that I would do and commitments I've made to myself clearly don't value them as much as, I would tell someone to do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's really crazy.
You're explaining the dynamic that exists within all of us, right? We are much more likely to keep a promise to somebody else because we want their respect. We want them to like us. We want them to approve of us.
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't do the same for ourselves, which is the relationship that one could argue matters most.
Yeah.
And therefore, people don't understand where that voice comes from, where that voice of doom and that voice of, shame and all of the voices, all of that self-doubt, it comes from the fact that we've broken promises to ourselves so many times. We don't trust ourselves. Just like if our partner says, I'll be there at 3:00, honey, and he never shows up. We don't trust him. So that voice is coming from somewhere. It doesn't just show up. And the way to rebuild the trust comes the same way as when we're rebuilding with a partner. It's like, okay, look, we're going to have to really make a change here. You and I, we're going to have to make some different promises. That's why the structure of having a promise with a consequence, so that we're still incentivized. We don't go into that shame spiral and then going public with it. That's what keeps us in action. Because in the morning, if I make a promise that I'm going to wake up at 5:00, right? And I don't, right? I hear the alarm and my brat says, you don't need to wake up. You went to bed late. It's no big deal. Just keep sleeping, Alyssa. Nothing happens physically, right? Like, bottom line is, I said I would get out of bed and I'm sleeping in my bed. But emotionally and psychologically, it's like that now goes into a bank of evidence that supports that I don't do what I say I'm going to do, which then later on will come to bite me in the ass when I need to go have a conversation with somebody about my business. See how it's all connected?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it makes so much sense. I even think of this morning. I mean, I try to wake up at 6, and there's specific things that I want to do when I wake up in the morning. I like to meditate. I like to do a workout, what have you. Sometimes I like to go for a walk, whatever. Lately, I've been working so late at night till like 12 or 1 in the morning, which is not part of my promises to myself. I'm supposed to shut it down at 9, and I can never seem to do that. So I've constantly just hitting snooze, and I snooze for an entire hour. And then I wake up at 7 and I'm pissed off at myself because I haven't woken up. Now I have to rush through my meditation. I'm sitting there and I'm like, be peaceful. You know what I mean? And it's like, not like, you know what I mean? And then, you kind of bulldoze your way through your day, get back home after, wherever you go. I work 9 to 5 or whatever, come back home. And then it's like, oh my God, I never have time for anything, and like all this stuff. And it's like constant rushing. But if I could just keep that promise to myself to wake up earlier, I wouldn't be so stressed the rest of the day.
I have a good system for you.
Please do.
Ready?
Send it over.
What time do you want to wake up at? 7:00? Is
6.
that your 6:00? And what time do you have to go to bed to wake up at 6?
Usually by 11.
Right. So like you really might have to have the promise be you're in bed by 11. Right? Because people who can't wake up usually means that they're not going to bed at the right time. So the reason why you're staying up past 11 is why? What are you doing?
I'm working.
Okay, right. So you, okay. So you have to computer shut by 5:00.
I'm
right?
like, no.
not even. It's really 10, right? Like
yeah.
Really shut by 10 so that you're sleeping by 11.
Yeah.
Take time to wind down and like go through the process. And then the consequence, if that doesn't happen, is a cold shower in the morning, which is not something that is punitive, and that's the thing about consequences. People oftentimes think like, oh, it's punitive, right? And it's actually not. There are natural consequences to everything we do or we don't do. The natural consequences, if you don't pay your rent on time, you lose your apartment. But because there's nothing physical that happens when we don't get out of bed, it's emotional. We are willing to keep doing the same behavior, right? Which is insane of us. So if you put in place the consequence of the cold shower, and then you tell us, your people, your audience, 30 days from now, you will be going to bed.
100%. I'll probably be going to bed tonight. No. Okay, guys, I'm making the commitment. I'm going to bed. I'm going to shut my stuff down by 10 o'clock. I will be in bed by 11. Because like, honestly, I just want to read a book before I go to bed. You know what I mean? Like I'm reading this really great one right now. Oh my God. You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hey.
Hey.
Yeah. And it's a great book, but I never have the time to read it because like who wants to read when you're rolling to bed at 1? No.
Classic. But like, can you see how it's so interesting how we've designed our life, right? Where we listen to the voices that are not serving our highest ideals. And the only thing that really will cause the change is the right action. When you haven't gone to the gym in 3 weeks, that voice does not want to go to the gym. There's no human that's like, yay,
Yes.
let me go. Therefore, you have to really change by overriding the system. That's why Nike's Just Do It was so smart, because it's just about taking the action, not thinking that we have to take the action first, right? The action changes the thought.
I love that. Oh my goodness, that's so good. And it's so true. And I think that a lot of the times, you know, from the people that that I work with, the people that I chat with, everyone always thinks it has to be this big grand thing, but it's like if you just start small, it grows. And this brings me to my second last question for you. And it's a question that I ask all my guests when they come on the show. And it's, how can you create a little more happiness in your day, every day, starting today?
Connect, give somebody love. Go reach out, like call somebody, text somebody that you haven't talked to. Like, the act of love instantly lets us receive love.
So true. I love that.
Simple. And I forget, I'm like so myopic in my day to day that when I feel bad about myself, the last thing I think is go reach out to somebody else, because when I suck in my mind, it's the voice of nobody wants to hear from me. And as a matter of fact, the opposite is true. So you have to do the opposite action, give love to receive the truth of reality. Actually, you don't suck, it's just in your mind.
That's so true. I love that. Alyssa, where can our listeners find you? Because I know they're going to want to learn more.
Thank you. So go to Handel Group. The online program that you spoke about is called Inner.U. And we actually have a coupon for your audience to receive a discount. And that's using the coupon code Happiness Happens, which I'm sure you'll include in your show notes. And then if someone wants to speak to me specifically, they can reach me at Alyssa@handelgroup.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Alyssa.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to this week's episode on the podcast. I hope you loved this one as much as I did. There's so many gems in here that you just have to go back to the beginning and listen to it again. Make sure you share it with someone that you know needs to hear this message, and make sure you tag us and let us know that you're listening, so that we know that you're listening and what you loved. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Wishing you an absolutely beautiful week. And remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it. Thanks so much for being here today. I hope these words have brought you inspiration, insight, and a bit more happiness. Please leave a comment or a review if this episode resonates with you. I would be so grateful. Until next time, remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it.